Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're jumping right into an explainer on one of the most chaotic, brilliant, and honestly heartbreaking stories in the entire history of sports. We're looking at the life and career of football's most polarizing prodigy, Neymar Jr. This is a story of just immense, raw talent, unbelievable pressure, and a destiny that feels both profoundly fulfilled and yet tragically incomplete. To really understand the man, we've got to start with the boy. Picture this. Neymar is just 13 years old, and he actually earns a trial at the legendary Real Madrid. But after flying all the way to Spain, he was completely rejected for being too skinny. They basically said he didn't have the body to survive European football. So he returns to Brazil in tears. But it was right then that his father gave him a piece of advice that changed everything. Son, people will say no to you, but don't you ever say no to yourself. And as you'll see throughout this explainer, those words literally became the fuel for his unstoppable rise. Okay, let's dive into this. Part 1. The boy in the favela. You simply cannot understand Neymar without understanding exactly where he came from. He definitely didn't grow up in luxury. He was a boy raised in a Brazilian favela, living in a really damp, dark house where water dripped right through the roof. Electricity, that was a luxury they often just couldn't afford. At 6 years old, he's practicing with balls his dad made out of old clothes and newspaper, kicking them around a dirt field in shoes so worn out they literally had to be taped together. Now contrast that with his status at age 31, earning a mind-blowing $150 million a year in Saudi Arabia, complete with massive car collections and mansions. It's an almost unimaginable leap from where he started. Yet, despite all those millions and the crazy fame, his core motivations stayed incredibly grounded. See, his father was a former pro footballer himself, but his own dream was killed by poverty. So his dad poured absolutely everything into molding his son's raw talent. Because of that, when you ask Neymar what his biggest victory is, he doesn't point to a shiny trophy. Nope. He points to the day, at just 15 years old, when he finally made enough money to buy his dad a house right near the stadium. And the best part? It was a house where the roof didn't leak. Which brings us to part 2, the monster of Santos. Well, all that extreme dedication quickly paid off. He enters the Santos Academy at age 11, and the kid with the taped shoes develops this lightning-fast, zigzag dribbling style that he honed on super tight futsal courts. It made him completely unplayable. And the sheer scale of his dominance, it is perfectly captured by this jaw-dropping number. 72. That is the total number of awards and trophies Neymar won in a span of just 5 years by the time he was 22. He wasn't just a good young player. He had half the globe convinced he was the single greatest wonder kid of all time, racking up over 230 games and 2 Ballon d'Or nominations while still playing over in South America. But with that immense talent came some serious friction. During one match, he was actually forbidden to take a penalty because he kept missing them with his banned stop-start technique, while Neymar fiercely cursed out his own coach right there on the pitch. It ended up getting the coach sacked, but it also prompted a rival manager, René Simons, to utter these really ominous words: "We are creating a monster." It was a huge foreshadowing of the behavioral controversies that would basically shadow his entire career. On the pitch, though, he was undeniably delivering the goods. He led Santos to the 2011 Copa Libertadores title, bringing South American glory back to the club for the very first time since Pelé did it way back in 1963. He was named player of the tournament for sure. And man, we absolutely cannot forget his mind-bending, Puskas-winning solo goal against Flamengo in that legendary head-to-head duel against Ronaldinho. The whole world was watching those clips go viral on YouTube, and it was crystal clear. Neymar was more than ready for Europe's biggest stage. Part 3. The Barcelona peak. So in 2013, Neymar makes this massive €92 million move to Spain to join Barcelona, teaming up with Lionel Messi and, soon enough, Luis Suarez. This was the MSN era, and it was pure, unadulterated dominance. In the 2014-2015 season, this trio scored an absolutely insane 122 goals together and won the treble. Neymar himself scored 39 individual goals that season, hitting the back of the net in the quarters, the semis, and the final of the Champions League. He single-handedly orchestrated the greatest comeback in Champions League history, overturning a 4-0 deficit to beat PSG 6-1. He was literally at the absolute peak of his powers. But right in the middle of these massive club triumphs, we start seeing the first major signs of his fragile physicality. Think back to the 2014 World Cup. It's hosted in his home country, and Neymar is carrying the immense weight of the entire Brazilian nation on his shoulders. The pressure was off the charts, but then disaster strikes in the quarterfinals against Colombia. A brutal knee to the back fractured his vertebrae. He stretchered off, and just like that, his tournament is over. Without their star boy, the emotionally shattered Brazilian side suffered that soul-crushing 7-1 humiliation to Germany. It was the first of many devastating injuries. Moving to part 4. Escaping Messi's shadow. And this brilliantly illustrates how things really started to shift. Fast forward to 2017. Neymar is 25 years old. He's winning literally everything at Barcelona. But he comes to a really difficult realization. No matter how brilliantly he plays, he feels he's never going to win the Ballon d'Or as long as he shares a pitch with Lionel Messi. So, realizing he had to leave to become the undisputed best in the world, he accepts a world record €222 million move to Paris Saint-Germain. Look at this staggering financial escalation. It set a trajectory that ultimately led to his mind-boggling €150 million year salary later in Saudi Arabia. He was making history, but you have to ask, at what cost to his ultimate goal? Because the tragic irony of that PSG move is just unbelievable. Neymar went to Paris to be the main man, right? But injuries repeatedly derailed his seasons. And while he was sitting on the sidelines, a young Kylian Mbappe rose up to become the new superstar of Paris. To make matters even crazier, a few years later, PSG goes out and signs Lionel Messi himself. I mean, you literally couldn't script it better. It's almost comical in a dark way. He left Barcelona specifically to escape Messi's shadow, only to find himself as the third man in PSG's new M&M attack, stuck right back behind Mbappe and Messi. Part 5, the tragic injury curse. You see, the true antagonist of Neymar's later career wasn't rival defenders or bad tactics. It was a relentless, agonizing curse of injuries. And they always seemed specifically timed to ruin his most crucial moments. Just as he was ready to prove himself on the world stage, his body would betray him. We had the 2014 fractured vertebra. Then, a metatarsal fracture right before the 2018 World Cup. Ankle ligament damage right at the start of the 2022 World Cup after being fouled 9 times in a single game. And finally, a torn ACL right after arriving in Saudi Arabia. It's just devastating bad luck keeping him one step away from the absolute pinnacle. And, of course, these injuries created a highly polarizing public image. We all remember the 2018 World Cup, right? An English newspaper actually calculated that he spent a total of 14 minutes rolling on the floor, clutching his ankles. It became a massive viral meme and led to widespread mockery. But if we look at it impartially for a second, this theatric behavior was a direct byproduct of a guy with immense dribbling quality being heavily targeted, kicked, and fouled relentlessly. I mean, imagine the psychological toll of knowing your greatest asset, your dazzling footwork, is virtually guaranteed to get you physically battered every single time you step onto the pitch. The toll was just massive. Eventually, that physical toll caught up to his market value in a truly astonishing way. When he moved to Saudi Arabia's Al Hilal in 2023, he tore his ACL after just 5 games. Since his transfer and salary cost the club almost €400 million, and he only played roughly 420 minutes, it's actually estimated he cost them roughly €1 million for every single minute he spent on the pitch. 1 million. That is an absolutely staggering figure, especially when you think back to that little boy playing with a newspaper ball and taped up shoes. Because of this catastrophic, injury-ruined stint, that Saudi move was labeled by many as the worst signing in the history of football. The manager even stated he could no longer perform at the expected level. So this abrupt end essentially forced Neymar to leave Saudi Arabia and return to his hometown club of Santos at age 33, battered but back exactly where it all began. Which brings us to our final chapter, Part 6, The Prince Who Never Became King. As we look back, we really have to grapple with the massive expectations placed on him from the very second he stepped onto that futsal court as a child. He was crowned the Prince of Football, but did he ever truly become the king? Well, critics will always point out that he never won the Ballon d'Or and never lifted the World Cup for Brazil. But let's look at the historical reality of his stats. With 79 goals, he is Brazil's all-time top goal scorer. He surpassed even the legendary Pelé. He also holds the joint record for the most assists in international football history. His sheer output is just historically undeniable. So the crucial point is that Neymar leaves behind a really deeply complicated legacy. It challenges us to ask ourselves, what do we value more in sports? Is it the robotic, clinical accumulation of trophies? Or is it the joyful, hugely expressive skill that inspires millions of kids to fall in love with the game in the first place? He completely dominated both South America and Europe, but he was also plagued by extreme pressure, controversial decisions, and incredibly fragile health. It's a career of immense beauty mixed with devastating what-ifs. So what does this all mean? Looking at everything we've broken down today about the boy who started with taped shoes in a favela, what is the true measure of his legacy? Did the terrible luck of injuries rob Neymar of his rightful crown? Or did he simply choose a different, wonderfully chaotic path to greatness? I'll leave you to debate that one. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.